Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time, not to some grand battlefield or a bustling marketplace, but to a quieter, more mysterious corner of the ancient world, the hushed chambers where ancient Egyptians sought answers in the realm of dreams. Imagine, if you will, the cool, dry air of the Nile Delta thousands of years ago. You're standing, perhaps, on the worn stone floor of a temple, the faint scent of myrrh lingering in the air. Outside, the harsh sun beats down, but inside, shadows dance lazily in the flickering lamplight, painting hieroglyphs on the walls that whisper forgotten secrets. You're here because you seek something, a cure, an answer, a glimpse of the future, and you believe, truly believe, that the gods will speak to you in your sleep. This isn't just about catching some ZS. It's about a profound, spiritual quest for wisdom in the liminal space between waking and sleeping. You probably won't survive a day in their linen tunics, but you might just find some peace in their quest for nocturnal enlightenment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've made your way to a specialized dream temple, or Parank, which literally translates to House of Life. These weren't just places for deep meditation. They were bustling centers of learning, healing, and, yes, divine communication. Think of it less as a hotel for your head and more as a sacred hospital for your soul, where the chief physician also happened to be a priest. You're not just wandering in off the dusty street, mind you. There's a certain gravitas to the atmosphere, a hushed reverence that settles over you as you pass through monumental gateways adorned with vibrant, if faded, frescoes. These weren't necessarily distinct buildings solely for dreaming. Often, specific areas within larger temple complexes were designated for incubation. For example, the Temple of Serapis at Saqqara was renowned for its dream-inducing properties, drawing supplicants from far and wide. Imagine the scene: tired travelers, hopeful healers, anxious petitioners, all gathering, each with a silent prayer or a pressing question nestled in their hearts, hoping that the night would bring clarity. You might hear the distant echo of a priest chanting, a low, rhythmic drone designed to soothe the mind and perhaps, just perhaps, coax it into a receptive state. It's certainly more comforting than your neighbor's late-night karaoke, wouldn't you agree? These spaces weren't just about passive waiting. They were active conduits, believed to be permeable membranes between the mortal world and the divine. You're not merely falling asleep. You're entering a sacred state of consciousness, a journey into the self and beyond. Historians still argue whether these incubation chambers were truly separate structures or integrated prayer halls. But what is clear is their singular purpose: to facilitate direct communication with the gods through the medium of dreams. Once you've arrived at the designated sacred space, the journey inward truly begins with a series of meticulous preparations. This wasn't a casual drop-in. You needed to be ritually clean, both physically and spiritually. Imagine the scene. You're guided through a series of purification rituals, starting with a thorough cleansing of your body. This wasn't just a quick splash of water. It involved washing with special natron salts, perhaps anointing your skin with fragrant oils, a bit like an ancient spa day, but with higher stakes. The goal was to shed the impurities of the mundane world, leaving you receptive to divine influence. You might even find yourself fasting, for a period ranging from a day to several days, to further purify the body and sharpen the mind. An empty stomach, they believed, made for a clearer channel to the gods. Think about it. No rumbling tummy distracting you from important celestial messages. Beyond physical cleanliness, spiritual purification was paramount. You would likely undergo a series of prayers and offerings, perhaps led by a priest or a master of secrets who understood the intricate language of the divine. You might present offerings of bread, beer, or incense, simple acts of devotion to appease the gods and show your sincerity. These weren't bribes, exactly, but rather gestures of respect, ensuring that your request was heard favorably. Imagine the faint, sweet scent of burning frankincense wafting through the cool, dark chamber, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread. It's certainly a more atmospheric way to prepare for sleep than scrolling through your phone, wouldn't you agree? You might be given special linen garments to wear, pure and unadorned, symbolizing your detachment from worldly concerns. These weren't pajamas, but more akin to sacred vestments, designed to signify your ritual purity. The act of preparing wasn't just about external cleanliness, it was deeply psychological. You were encouraged to empty your mind of anxieties, to focus solely on your intent, your question, or your desired healing. This was an early form of meditative practice, a deliberate effort to achieve a state of mental tranquility conducive to receiving visions. You might lie on a special bed or mat, perhaps made of palm fronds or soft linen, facing a statue of a god or a sacred image. The air would be still, save for the gentle rustle of the priest's robes or the soft murmur of prayers from fellow supplicants. This deliberate calm was crucial. Historians still argue whether the dietary restrictions were purely for purification or if certain herbs or substances were ingested to aid in dream induction, though direct evidence for psychoactive substances is scarce and debated. What is clear, however, is the profound emphasis on physical and mental readiness, transforming the simple act of sleep into a potent spiritual tool. You were not just going to bed, you were preparing to enter a sacred dialogue. With your body and mind meticulously prepared, you settle into the designated sleeping area, ready to invite the divine into your dreams. But who exactly were you hoping to commune with? The ancient Egyptian pantheon was vast and specialized, and certain deities held particular sway over the realms of sleep, dreams, and healing. Chief among these was Serapis, a Greco-Egyptian deity whose cult gained immense popularity during the Ptolemaic period. He was often depicted with features of both Greek gods like Zeus and Egyptian gods like Osiris and Apis, making him a bridge between cultures and a powerful figure for dream incubation. You'd probably find yourself lying in a chamber dedicated to him, perhaps near a statue of Serapis with his serene, bearded face, radiating an aura of calm. It's almost like having a very fancy, very old security blanket. Another significant deity was Imhotep, the deified architect, physician, and vizier to Pharaoh Djoser. Though originally a mortal man, Imhotep's reputation for wisdom and healing was so profound that he was elevated to godhood. He was often invoked by those seeking cures through dreams, much like a divine doctor making house calls in your subconscious. You might offer a small, finely crafted miniature of a sick limb or an afflicted organ to his effigy, hoping he would diagnose your ailment in your sleep. Imagine trying to explain that to your modern GP. Of course, the oracles of Bes also played a fascinating role, though perhaps less directly in dream incubation and more in direct prophetic communication. Bes was a quirky, dwarf-like deity, often depicted with a cheerful, slightly grotesque face, who was the protector of households, childbirth, and children, and also dispelled evil spirits and nightmares. While not typically the focus of dream temples, his presence might have been invoked to ensure a safe and undisturbed night of sleep, free from malevolent dream influences. You wouldn't want a night terror messing up your divine message, right? Beyond these specific figures, the general concept of Osiris, god of the afterlife and resurrection, often permeated dream practices. As the lord of the Duat, the underworld, he was seen as the ultimate source of rebirth and transformation, and dreams were sometimes viewed as a temporary journey to his realm. Dreaming of Osiris, or being guided by him, could signify spiritual renewal or insights into your destiny beyond mortal life. Historians still argue whether the dream-inducing qualities attributed to specific temples were due to the inherent power of the deity worshipped there, or if the ritualistic practices themselves were the primary drivers of the dream experience. What is clear is that the Egyptians meticulously matched their intentions with the appropriate divine patron, ensuring their nocturnal petitions were addressed to the right cosmic inbox. Now that you've prepared your body and mind, and have a divine recipient in mind, what messages were you actually hoping to receive in these sacred slumber sessions? The ancient Egyptians were avid interpreters of dreams, believing them to be direct communications from the gods, or sometimes from the spirits of the deceased. But unlike our modern, often chaotic dreams, theirs were often sought for specific purposes, and thus had more structured interpretations. You weren't just analyzing random dream weirdness, you were looking for divine guidance. One of the most common dream motifs was water. If you dreamt of clear, flowing water, it was generally a good omen, signifying purification, life, and abundance. Think of the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt. Dreaming of it in its benevolent form was always a positive sign. However, muddy or turbulent water could signify trouble or impurity. So, if you dreamt your bathwater turned to sludge, it was probably time for more offerings. Animals frequently appeared in dreams and carried significant symbolism. Dreaming of a cat, particularly a sleek, healthy one, could be auspicious, reflecting protection and the presence of the goddess Batet. If you dreamed of a crocodile, it wasn't always a bad sign, oddly enough. It could symbolize strength and power, or perhaps a warning from the god Sobuk. But, let's be real, a dream about a giant reptile probably still made you wake up with a jolt. Snakes, too, had dual meanings. A cobra rising in defense could be protective, while a snake biting you might indicate an enemy or illness. It was all about context, much like deciphering your uncle's cryptic text messages. Colors also played a role. Green often represented rebirth, fertility, and growth, linked to Osiris and new life. Red could symbolize danger or vitality, depending on the context. Dreaming of a large, fertile tree was often a symbol of growth, stability, and connection to the divine. Imagine drifting off and seeing a lush, vibrant sycamore in your dream, a very soothing thought. Dreaming of your teeth falling out, a common anxiety dream today, held a similar unsettling meaning for the Egyptians, often portending loss or death. And while we might fret over forgetting our wallet, they were more concerned about neglecting their offerings to the gods if they dreamt of empty granaries. The symbolism was deeply rooted in their daily lives and spiritual beliefs. Historians still argue whether these interpretations were universally applied across all social strata, or if different classes had nuanced understandings of the same dream symbols. What is clear is that these interpretations weren't just random guesses. They were part of a systematized approach to understanding the divine will, a sort of ancient dream dictionary in their minds. You were taught how to read these signs, transforming your nocturnal visions into actionable insights. To aid in this complex process of dream interpretation, the ancient Egyptians didn't just rely on gut feelings or whispered family traditions. They had actual dream books, codified texts that served as guides for understanding nocturnal visions. Imagine, if you will, a papyrus scroll, carefully unrolled in a dimly lit temple chamber, its surface covered in neat hieratic script, a simplified, cursive form of hieroglyphs used for everyday writing. These weren't exactly dreams for dummies, but rather serious theological and practical manuals. The most famous of these is the Chester Beatty Papyrus III, which dates back to the Ramesside period, roughly 1292 to 1070 BCE. It's essentially an ancient Egyptian dream dictionary, but far more intricate than just looking up keywords. This papyrus is divided into two main columns, one for good dreams and one for bad dreams, though a more accurate translation might be dreams that lead to a good outcome and dreams that lead to a bad outcome. So, if you dreamt of, say, seeing your own face in a mirror, a common entry, the papyrus might tell you. If a man sees himself looking into a mirror, good, it means a new life. Conversely, dreaming of your teeth falling out, as we discussed, would be categorized as bad, perhaps foretelling loss. These dream books weren't just lists of symbols and outcomes. They also often included recommended actions. If your dream was bad, the papyrus might suggest a specific ritual or incantation to ward off the negative consequences. For instance, if you dreamt of a snake attacking you, the text might provide a spell to recite upon waking, ensuring the venom of ill fortune wouldn't take hold. Think of it as ancient spiritual damage control. It's certainly more proactive than simply sighing and saying, "Well, that was a weird one." Who used these books? Primarily, it would have been priests, scribes, and specialized dream interpreters known as masters of the secret things. You wouldn't just grab one off a shelf. These were sacred texts, handled with reverence and accessed by those trained to understand their nuances. They were part of a larger body of esoteric knowledge, passed down through generations. These interpreters would listen carefully to your recounted dream, cross-referencing it with the papyrus, and then deliver the divine message, often with additional guidance or ritual prescriptions. Historians still argue whether these dream books reflected genuinely widespread folk beliefs, or if they were primarily tools for the priestly elite to control and interpret divine communication for the masses. What is undeniable, however, is their existence as tangible proof of the Egyptians' deep engagement with the subconscious realm, treating dreams not as fleeting fantasies, but as profound, actionable messages from the cosmos. So, you've cleansed yourself, envisioned the right deity, and maybe even consulted a dream book. But how, exactly, did the Egyptians go about inducing these prophetic or healing dreams? This wasn't just about wishing upon a star. It involved specific, often gentle, techniques designed to open the mind to divine influence. The core practice was known as dream incubation. Imagine yourself lying down in a dedicated sleeping chamber within a temple, often a quiet, darkened room, perhaps with niches for small offerings or a flickering oil lamp casting long, dancing shadows. You would typically lie on a simple mat or a low bed, sometimes directly on the temple floor, connecting you more intimately with the sacred ground. The emphasis was on simplicity and detachment from worldly comforts to foster a state of receptivity. This wasn't exactly a luxury resort, but more like a spiritual sleep study. Before drifting off, you would actively formulate your question or desire. This wasn't a vague wish. It was a clear, concise petition to the gods. For instance, if you were seeking a cure for an illness, you might repeat the name of the deity associated with healing, like Imhotep, along with a specific request for a remedy to be revealed in your dream. If you were worried about a decision, you might ask for a clear sign or direction. This focused intention was believed to be crucial for guiding the dream's content. It's a bit like setting your spiritual GPS to a very specific destination. Sometimes, a priest or a dream master would provide guidance, perhaps whispering incantations or prayers as you settled down. These weren't necessarily loud or dramatic. Often, they were soft, repetitive murmurs, designed to soothe and focus your mind, guiding you gently towards the desired state of consciousness. You might hear the faint scent of calming incense, like frankincense or myrrh, believed to have purifying and mind-altering properties, contributing to the serene atmosphere. While there's no direct evidence of powerful psychoactive drugs being widely used for dream induction, some scholars suggest that certain herbs or preparations might have been consumed for their calming or slightly mind-altering effects, preparing the body for a deeper, more receptive sleep. However, this is largely speculative. The primary methods focused on ritual purity, intention, and a conducive environment. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of dream incubation relied purely on psychological suggestion and the power of belief, or if there were more subtle, unrecorded ritualistic elements at play. What is clear is that the entire process was meticulously orchestrated to facilitate a direct, divine encounter in the silent theater of your sleeping mind. You weren't just waiting for a dream, you were actively inviting it. When you finally drifted off in those ancient chambers, the dreams that came were often believed to be not just prophetic, but also profoundly healing. For the ancient Egyptians, the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms was permeable, and illness was frequently seen as a spiritual imbalance or a visitation from malevolent forces. Therefore, a divine dream could offer both diagnosis and cure. Imagine you're suffering from a persistent ailment, a lingering fever, a chronic pain, or perhaps a mysterious malaise that baffles the local physicians. You've sought out the dream temple as a last resort, believing that the gods, specifically deities like Imhotep or Serapis, could reveal the root cause of your suffering or bestow a miraculous recovery. You lie there, focusing your mind on your affliction, perhaps even placing a small replica of the diseased body part next to you as a visual petition. The healing dream itself might not be a direct revelation like a divine voice telling you, "Eat this specific herb thrice daily." Instead, it could be highly symbolic. You might dream of a specific animal whose characteristics relate to your illness, or a plant whose properties are the key to your cure. For instance, dreaming of cool, flowing water could signify a cleansing of impurities and a return to health. If you dreamt of a snake shedding its skin, it might symbolize a profound transformation and recovery from a debilitating condition. It's like getting a prescription, but instead of Latin, it's written in metaphor. Sometimes, the dream might present a direct image of the deity administering the cure, perhaps touching you or offering a sacred object. Or, you might dream of a specific ritual or action you need to perform upon waking. This could be anything from drinking a particular potion prepared by the temple priests to visiting a sacred spring or making a specific offering. These were not always easy answers. Interpreting them required the expertise of the dream interpreters. You wouldn't want to misinterpret a dream about a crocodile as a sign to wrestle one, when it was actually telling you to go for a swim in the sacred lake. The healing extended beyond physical ailments. Mental distress, anxieties, and even existential crises were also brought to the dream temples. A dream might offer solace, guidance through a difficult personal situation, or reveal a path to inner peace. Historians still argue whether the perceived cures were purely psychosomatic, a result of the powerful placebo effect enhanced by ritual and belief, or if some of the practices had genuine, if rudimentary, medicinal efficacy. What is certain is that for the Egyptians, the healing power of dreams was a deeply held belief, transforming the subconscious into a therapeutic chamber where divine intervention was possible. You weren't just sleeping. You were inviting a spiritual physician into your innermost self. Beyond personal healing, dreams held immense significance for the highest echelons of Egyptian society, particularly for the pharaohs. For a ruler whose legitimacy often rested on divine favor, prophetic dreams were not merely personal insights, but crucial instruments of statecraft, guiding decisions on everything from military campaigns to the construction of grand temples. Imagine the weight of an empire resting on your nocturnal visions. No pressure, right? One of the most famous accounts of a pharaoh's prophetic dream comes from the dream stele of Thutmose IV. As a young prince, Thutmose, not yet destined for the throne, supposedly fell asleep in the shade of the Great Sphinx at Giza after a hunting trip. In his dream, the Sphinx, embodying the god Harmakis, appeared to him, complaining that its body was covered in sand and promising Thutmose the kingship if he would clear it. Upon waking, Thutmose undertook the massive task of excavating the Sphinx, and indeed, he later became pharaoh. This dream, immortalized on the stele placed between the Sphinx's paws, served as powerful propaganda, legitimizing his rule as divinely ordained. It's like getting a text message from a deity telling you to clean up a monument for a promotion. Pharaohs would often visit specific dream temples, or have designated sacred spaces within their palaces to seek divine guidance on matters of state. Before embarking on a military expedition, a pharaoh might seek a dream that would predict victory or reveal the enemy's weaknesses. Before initiating a major building project, they might look for a dream that affirmed divine approval or even provided architectural inspiration. These weren't just private spiritual experiences. They were public demonstrations of the pharaoh's unique connection to the gods, bolstering their authority and inspiring confidence among their subjects. The interpretation of these royal dreams would have been handled by the most trusted and senior priests, often those with direct access to the pharaoh and a deep understanding of political and religious nuances. Their interpretations could sway monumental decisions, making them incredibly powerful figures behind the scenes. Historians still argue whether these prophetic dreams were genuine spiritual experiences, carefully orchestrated political maneuvers, or a combination of both, crafted to reinforce the pharaoh's divine right to rule. What is clear is that the line between personal spirituality and state power was often blurred in ancient Egypt, with dreams serving as a potent conduit for both. You were not just a pharaoh, you were a vessel for divine will, and your dreams were the sacred blueprint for an entire civilization. Beyond the solemn rituals of dream temples and the grand pronouncements of pharaohs, another fascinating element intertwined with ancient Egyptian dream practices was the use of magic and manipulation. This wasn't about pulling rabbits out of hats, but rather employing spells, amulets, and specific ritualistic actions to influence the content of dreams, protect against nightmares, or even coerce the divine into providing desired information. It's a bit like trying to hack your own subconscious, but with more linen and less caffeine. You might, For instance, acquire a specially inscribed amulet, perhaps made of faience or carved stone, depicting a protective deity like Tarit, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth, or Bes, the dwarf god who warded off evil. These amulets weren't just pretty trinkets. They were believed to be imbued with specific magical properties. You might wear one around your neck as you lay down for dream incubation, or place it under your pillow, hoping its inherent power would guide your dreams toward beneficence and away from malevolent influences. Think of it as a very old-school dream catcher, but with more divine muscle. Incantations and spells were also crucial. Before falling asleep, you might recite specific words or phrases, often rhythmic and repetitive, designed to invoke a particular deity or to command a specific dream outcome. These weren't mere prayers. They were believed to be performative utterances capable of shaping reality, or at least the reality of your dreamscape. A spell might begin with an address to a god, followed by a clear statement of intent. "Oh, mighty Thoth, send me a dream tonight that reveals the cure for my ailment," or, "by the power of Ra, ward off all dark visions from my sleep." The belief was that the very act of uttering these words, correctly and with conviction, could compel the divine to respond. Sometimes, the magic involved sympathetic rituals. If you wanted to dream of a specific person, you might sleep with an object associated with them. If you sought to know about a lost item, you might focus intensely on a drawing or representation of it before drifting off. These practices were rooted in the idea that objects and images held a connection to the things they represented, allowing for a magical transference of information. Historians still argue whether these magical practices were considered distinct from religious devotion or seamlessly integrated into the larger spiritual framework of ancient Egypt. What is certain is that the Egyptians employed a holistic approach, blending piety, ritual, and a touch of practical magic to navigate the mysterious waters of the dream world, ensuring their nocturnal journeys were as fruitful and safe as possible. You weren't just a passive recipient of dreams. You were an active participant in their creation. While dreams were a direct line to the divine for many, the ancient Egyptians also relied on oracles for guidance, a practice that sometimes intersected with dream visions but operated on a slightly different principle. Think of it as the difference between getting a direct message from a deity in your sleep versus going to a public figure who channels divine will. An oracle was essentially a medium through which a god communicated with mortals, often in a temple setting. This wasn't always about sleep. Sometimes, it involved a priest interpreting the movements of a cult statue, the rustling of sacred trees, or even the behavior of sacred animals. For instance, the Apis bull oracle at Memphis was renowned. People would pose questions to the sacred bull and its movements. Entering one enclosure versus another, or choosing a particular food, would be interpreted as divine answers. Imagine asking a very large, sacred bovine about your relationship problems. Seems legit. However, dreams could certainly inspire an oracle, or an oracle might direct someone to seek a dream vision. A supplicant might visit an oracle with a complex question, and the oracle, rather than giving a direct answer, might advise them to undergo dream incubation at a specific temple. In this scenario, the oracle acts as a spiritual gatekeeper, guiding the seeker towards the most effective method of divine communication for their particular need. It's like a tiered support system for spiritual inquiries. The key difference lies in the mediation. In dream incubation, you were the direct recipient of the divine message, though you might need an interpreter to decipher its symbolism. With an oracle, the divine message was mediated through a priest or a sacred animal, who then conveyed it to you. This mediation often added a layer of authority and public validation to the message, especially for matters of state or community concern. A pharaoh might rely on an oracle's pronouncement for a military campaign, whereas a personal dream might guide a private decision. Historians still argue whether the popularity of oracles waxed and waned in inverse proportion to the perceived efficacy of dream incubation, or if they were complementary practices serving different social and spiritual needs. What is clear is that both systems provided avenues for Egyptians to seek divine input into their lives, blurring the lines between the sacred and the mundane. You had options for divine guidance, whether directly from the dream world or through the authoritative voice of a temple oracle. Among the fascinating and often bewildering aspects of ancient Egyptian beliefs was the concept of the Great Sleeper, a peculiar idea that hints at an even deeper, more cosmic understanding of slumber and its connection to the divine. This isn't a widely documented, mainstream deity like Osiris or Ra, but rather a fringe tidbit, a concept whispered in certain texts or interpreted from ambiguous religious imagery. It suggests a divine entity, or perhaps a primordial force, whose very existence was intrinsically linked to a state of profound, perhaps eternal, sleep, and whose slumber might even induce or influence the collective dream state of humanity. Imagine a vast, ancient being, dwelling in the deepest recesses of the underworld or the most remote corners of the cosmos, perpetually in a state of suspended animation. This great sleeper wasn't necessarily a god to be worshipped directly in temples, but more of a foundational concept, an underlying rhythm of the universe. Its cosmic slumber might have been seen as the origin of all dreams, a vast, shared dreamscape from which individual visions emerged. It's almost like the ultimate server farm for all conscious and subconscious activity, except it runs on divine snooze cycles. The concept might have arisen from observations of the natural world, the cyclical nature of sleep and waking, the fertile silt left by the Nile after its recession, hinting at a period of rest before renewal. If the world itself underwent periods of dormancy and reawakening, perhaps there was a divine archetype embodying this state. This idea could have provided a philosophical framework for understanding why dreams were so potent and universal, because they stemmed from a primordial source of sleep itself. You weren't just dreaming, you were tapping into the great sleeper's vast, ongoing reverie. Historians still argue whether the great sleeper was a fully developed mythological figure, a philosophical concept, or simply a poetic metaphor for the mystery of sleep and the subconscious. What is certain is that such ideas illustrate the profound and multifaceted ways the ancient Egyptians grappled with the nature of consciousness and its connection to the divine. It wasn't enough to just interpret dreams. They sought to understand the very source of dreaming itself, delving into concepts that blur the lines between mythology, philosophy, and the nascent stirrings of what we might now call psychology. You might find yourself pondering this ancient mystery as you drift off, wondering if your own dreams are just echoes from that ancient, cosmic slumber. As you continue your journey through the ancient Egyptian dreamscape, you realize that dreams weren't just about seeking earthly healing or political guidance. For a civilization so profoundly focused on the afterlife, dreams also served as a crucial bridge between the living and the dead. This was a profound, often comforting, aspect of their dream practices, the ability to commune with deceased loved ones or revered ancestors. Imagine the quiet sorrow of someone grieving a recently departed family member. In ancient Egypt, the dead weren't simply gone. They had merely transitioned to another realm, the duat, often depicted as a continuation of existence, albeit a spiritual one. Dreams, then, became a potent avenue for maintaining that connection. You might seek a dream from a deceased parent for advice, a lost child for comfort, or a revered ancestor for wisdom. It was like a very, very old phone line to the other side. These visitations in dreams were taken seriously. If you dreamt of a deceased loved one, their appearance and words were carefully considered. They might offer warnings, give blessings, or even convey instructions about their tomb or cult. For example, a dream might reveal that a neglected offering at a tomb needed to be replenished, or that a particular ritual was required to ensure the deceased's peaceful journey in the afterlife. Ignoring such a dream could be seen as disrespectful and might even lead to misfortune for the living. You wouldn't want to upset your spectral grandma, right? Sometimes, the deceased themselves were believed to initiate these dream encounters, reaching out from the duat to communicate with the living. These spontaneous dreams, unbidden by specific incubation rituals, were often seen as particularly powerful and authentic. The Egyptians would record these letters to the dead, sometimes on ostraca, pottery sherds, or papyrus, recounting their dreams and expressing their hopes or concerns to the departed. These weren't just therapeutic exercises, they were active attempts at inter-realm communication. Historians still argue whether these dreams were interpreted as literal visitations or symbolic representations of unresolved grief or psychological needs. What is undeniable, however, is the deep emotional and spiritual significance the Egyptians placed on these nocturnal encounters. The ability to speak with the dead in dreams offered solace, continuity, and a reinforcing belief in the enduring nature of the soul. You weren't just dreaming. You were maintaining an active, albeit ethereal, connection with those who had passed beyond the veil. Having explored the practical and spiritual dimensions of ancient Egyptian dream practices, it's worth pausing to consider how modern scholarship views these fascinating traditions. When we, with our contemporary understanding of psychology and neuroscience, look back at these ancient beliefs, the picture becomes a blend of awe, skepticism, and continued debate. On one hand, many scholars acknowledge the profound psychological wisdom embedded in these ancient practices. The emphasis on ritual purification, mental focus, and a serene environment before sleep aligns remarkably well with modern techniques for inducing relaxation and promoting restful sleep. Think of guided meditation or mindfulness practices. The Egyptians were, in a way, doing something similar thousands of years ago, preparing their minds to be receptive. The idea that focusing intensely on a problem before sleep can sometimes lead to solutions in dreams or upon waking is a common, anecdotal experience even today. It's like your brain is quietly crunching numbers in the background while you're offline. However, the direct interpretation of dreams as literal divine messages or as precise diagnoses for physical ailments is where modern scientific perspectives diverge. While we recognize the power of the placebo effect and the mind-body connection, attributing a cure solely to a dream vision, rather than perhaps a concurrent herbal remedy or natural healing, is something modern medicine cannot confirm. Historians still argue whether the perceived efficacy of dream healing was due to genuine divine intervention, psychosomatic effects, or a combination of both, where belief itself was a powerful healing agent. It's hard to get a double-blind study going on a 3,000-year-old dream temple. Another point of scholarly debate revolves around the specific techniques used for dream incubation. While texts describe lying in temples and making offerings, the exact methodology and the full sensory experience are often inferred. Were there subtle manipulations of light, sound, or even air quality that enhanced the dream state? Were certain herbs, perhaps not psychoactive but calming, consistently used? These are questions that archaeological evidence and textual analysis continue to probe, often without definitive answers. Despite these critical lenses, modern Egyptologists and historians generally treat these practices with immense respect. They offer invaluable insights into the ancient Egyptian worldview, their relationship with the divine, and their understanding of consciousness. They weren't primitive or superstitious in the derogatory sense. They were engaging with complex phenomena using the intellectual and spiritual tools available to them. You might find yourself marveling at their ingenuity, even if their methods seem fantastical to our eyes. Their beliefs about dreams highlight a fundamental human quest for meaning, guidance, and connection to something larger than themselves, a quest that continues to resonate today. As our journey through ancient Egyptian dream practices draws to a close, it's worth tracing the subtle, often unseen, influence these concepts had on later cultures and, indeed, how echoes of their beliefs resonate even in our modern understanding of dreams. While direct lines of transmission are often blurry, the foundational ideas laid down along the Nile seeped into the intellectual currents of the ancient world. Consider the Greeks and Romans. They, too, practiced dream incubation, often in temples dedicated to healing deities like Asclepius. You'd find supplicants sleeping in sacred abbata, dormitories, within these temples, hoping for divine visions that would reveal cures. This practice bears a striking resemblance to the Egyptian parank, suggesting a cultural exchange of ideas, perhaps carried along trade routes or through philosophical discourse. The famed Greek physician Galen, for instance, recorded instances of patients receiving diagnoses and treatments through dreams. It's almost as if the concept of a dream doctor was a universally good idea, regardless of what gods you worshipped. The meticulous interpretation of dream symbols, so central to Egyptian practice, also found its way into later traditions. Early Christian and Islamic scholars often compiled their own dream interpretation manuals, some of which bore similarities to the older Egyptian archetypes. While the specific symbols and their religious contexts changed, the underlying principle, that dreams carry meaning and can offer guidance, remained potent. You might find a medieval European dream book that, while not mentioning crocodiles from the Nile, still categorizes dreams as good or bad omens based on similar patterns of thought. Even in our contemporary world, remnants of these ancient beliefs persist, albeit in secularized forms. The idea of sleeping on a problem to find a solution, the intuitive feeling that a vivid dream might hold a deeper meaning, or even the popularity of modern dream dictionaries. These are faint whispers of the systematic and profound way the ancient Egyptians engaged with their nocturnal lives. We might not go to a temple to induce a dream about our career choices, but we still often wake up with a sudden clarity that seems to have arrived fully formed from our sleep. It's like your brain is a very slow, very ancient supercomputer processing things when you're not looking. Historians still argue the precise mechanisms of this cultural transmission. Was it through direct teaching, shared written texts, or simply a widespread human tendency to interpret the mysterious realm of sleep? What is clear is that the Egyptians, with their sophisticated understanding of the mind-body-spirit connection, laid much of the groundwork for how succeeding civilizations, including our own, would approach the enigmatic world of dreams. You might realize that your own casual musings on a strange dream aren't so different from the questions asked in hushed tones in an ancient Egyptian dream temple thousands of years ago. So, you've journeyed through the ancient Egyptian dream temples, witnessed pharaohs seeking divine counsel in their sleep, and peered into the meticulous world of dream interpretation. We've seen how they purified themselves, called upon specific deities, and even used magical amulets to influence their nocturnal visions. It's been a winding path through the subconscious, millennia in the making. But what truly defines the legacy of these ancient Egyptian dream practices? It's more than just a historical curiosity. It's a testament to humanity's enduring quest for meaning and connection beyond the tangible. Their systematic approach to dreams, not as random firings of the brain, but as profound messages from the divine or insights into one's own well-being, highlights a level of sophistication that often surprises modern observers. They didn't have neurobiology, but they had a profound understanding of the human experience and its deeper currents. It's almost like they built a very old, very effective spiritual Wi-Fi network. The very idea that dreams could be a source of healing, both physical and emotional, demonstrates an intuitive grasp of the mind-body connection. While our scientific methods differ, the underlying principle that our inner world can profoundly affect our outer health is something we still explore today. They understood that a troubled mind could lead to a troubled body, and that peace, even in sleep, could be a powerful medicine. Remember the focus on mental tranquility before entering the dream state? That wasn't just ritual, it was smart psychology. And the meticulousness with which they approached dream interpretation, creating codified dream books and employing specialized interpreters, speaks volumes about their commitment to understanding every facet of existence. They weren't just shrugging off bizarre dreams, they were actively trying to decode them, believing that every symbol held a key to some deeper truth. Historians still argue whether the complexity of their dream symbolism was a result of divine revelation or a cultural construct to maintain social and religious order. What remains undeniable is the sheer depth of their intellectual and spiritual engagement with the sleeping mind. Ultimately, the ancient Egyptian hypnotism of themselves into dreams wasn't just about falling asleep. It was about waking up to deeper truths. It was about listening to the whispers of the gods, the echoes of ancestors, and the silent wisdom of their own souls. It was a practice designed to provide comfort, guidance, and a sense of profound connection in a world that, much like ours, was often unpredictable and challenging. You might find that, as you drift off tonight, you carry a small piece of that ancient wisdom with you, a quiet reverence for the mysteries that unfold when the world goes dark and your own internal journey truly begins.